Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Buggana Rajendranath. I am the former Minister for Finance for the state of Andhra Pradesh. But as I was introduced, I started my political career as a Sarpanch, and my schooling was 1st to 10th public school Begumpet. PUC was Christian College Madras Higher Secondary School, and then engineering in Ballari. After that I went back to my native place, my native village Bethamcherla in Kurnool district, erstwhile Kurnool district and present Nandyal district. And after that I served as the Sarpanch of Bethamcherla for 2 terms, and after a decade of staying there I became an MLA first in 2014. After that, I got an opportunity to be the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee of Andhra Pradesh for about 2.5 years. And then 2019, our party came to power, and I was made the Minister for Finance. I also held the portfolios of commercial taxes, skill development, and training. And before I start my speech, so I would request you to pardon me for not having good articulation capacities in English. The reason being, after the 10th in public school, I went to Madras. So somehow Madras, we had more of the das and d's than the English of the public school. And after that, went to Ballari, where again English was not normally used as a means of communication. After that I went back to the village, and as you know, in village life we rarely get a chance or opportunity to speak in English. And Telugu, our local Rayalaseema dialect, was what we are used to for 20 years after my going back to the village. Therefore this not so good articulation capacities in English. Either way, I might be switching into Telugu now and then during my address. As we are all aware, because most of the guests here are seniors in various fields, local governance, the need of local governance for a common man, Aam Aadmi, Samanya Manavadu, our day-to-day connect with the government or requirement with the government is all transportation, water supply, sewerage, electricity, such things which occupy most of our needs. Rarely does anybody go to a Tahsildar office or a police station or any other such government department for their day-to-day requirements. And as we have noticed over a period of time, phenomenal growth in population, phenomenal urbanization has led only to more requirement of the participation of local governance in regular governance. When we go to a brief history of the evolution of local governance, from ancient times where Panchayat, ante any small unit that was governed during the times of the kings, even though they might not have been elected, a panchayat, that means a council of about 5 people who look into the day-to-day needs of the governance of that small habitation. Similarly, in police language and revenue language, we also use the word panchanama. So when somebody comes and makes a record of a happening, panchanama, that is 5 people are their local elders who actually do the recording of the happening. So panchayats are present way back, right in the BCs. After that, then came a century, 2 centuries ago, it started with the British East India Company first making Madras a local body, a municipal corporation, and even prior to that, the local needs were actually met by local people. a beautiful explanation of local needs. There is a book called Tanks of South India. So this was written, well-researched document written by one Dr. Vaidyanathan. So what he says is, more than 50% of the minor irrigation tanks of the present Indian peninsula were actually located in South India, that is the present states of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. They say that every drop of water, rainwater, was captured in some form or the other before it was let into the sea. So the system of tanks, cascading tanks, water, etc., to suit the local public's needs as well as the irrigation needs way back. This was done in such a way, I believe. It's a very beautiful book where it has been recorded very well. It says that this has been done in such a way that the maintenance of the tanks was not taken care of by the kingdom or the king. It was taken care of by the local village, local population. So the tax that was collected from the high cut was used for the maintenance of the tanks and the canals. And there's one other interesting offtake from that. It says a particular college was established in the present Nellore district, where people were trained to chisel stones, to maintain the bunds, to deweed the bunds, etc. And this was paid for by the local population, where tax was collected locally, not by the king or the kingdom. Subsequently, many years after I read this book, I happened to go on election duty to Nellore. There I was put in charge of a place called Kovur. Kovur incidentally has amongst the biggest population of community called Vadderas. So we can actually take this as this was the place where the Vadderas were trained. So how the community got the name Vaddera is, in Telugu Vaddu is the bank. So the maintenance of the Vaddu was done by a community who are Vadderas. Now if you notice, in Karnataka, in Tamil Nadu, in Andhra Pradesh, everywhere, wherever there is a person by name Vaddera, they are actually of Telugu origin. So that means Vaddera was trained to maintain the tanks. They were trained in a college in Nellore, and subsequently the maintenance of this entire system was actually done by the revenues collected from the Aikadars. And it also says that when a kingdom was conquered or occupied by one other kingdom, they made sure that nobody disturbed the tax collection or the maintenance of the tanks or the canals by the money that was taken. The first time a disturbance happened was after the British started ruling India. They say that there was a committee that was formed where tanks that are of small capacity, 200 acres and below, are not worth maintaining. Therefore, they were given away as pattas. That is the reason that when you look at certain very fertile lands in villages, they are actually once upon a time tanks which because of the silting they become fertile. And a little after that they say that a place called Ontimetta, I think a lot of you would have, many of you would have visited this famous place Ontimetta where there is a Sri Rama temple in Kadapa district. There I believe there is an inscription which says, what is it that is required to build a good tank? So it says you need to have 2 hillocks, a gap in between where that you can have a bund constructed economically. You need to have clay soil so that water is retained, and you need to have agriculture land in the towards the front of the tank where the water can be used for agriculture. And the 10th point they say is you need to have a king who actually really cares for the welfare of his subjects. So this whole thing, the reason I am explaining to you in this context is local governance of local systems was there long, long ago. It is just that in the last few centuries, probably the importance that was given in those days was not actually given by democratically elected governments. So when we look at the evolution, it goes back to the Madras Local Boards Act of 1884, and then the Government of India Act 1919, where I think all the bureaucrats here will be well versed with that. And the Government of India Act 1935, where for the first time there was a provincial list that was made. I think that was the first time that there was a provincial list. Because here it says, in the 7th schedule of the Government of India Act 1935, where for the first time there is called a list 2, where item number 13 says, local government, that is, so this was the authority that was given, mandate that was given to the provincial governments. Local government, that is to say, the constitution and powers of municipal corporations, improvement trust, district boards, mining settlement authorities and other local authorities for the purpose of local self-government or village administration. So this is the year 1935. I think our constitution also takes a lot from the 1935 Act. And after that, then came various committees post-independence. This is the evolution. Balwantrai Mehta Committee of 1957, where for the first time a 3-tier Panchayat Raj system was envisaged. And then came the Ashok Mehta Committee of 1977, where Mr. Ashok Mehta actually recommended a 2-tier system, but which was not adopted. And then a Santanam Committee of 1963, where land revenue also was proposed to be given to the local governments, local bodies. And then the G.V.K. Rao Committee of 1985, where planning and district planning boards were suggested. Then came the L.M. Singhvi Committee of where the constitutional recognition to the Grama Sabhas were also suggested. And then the Tungon Committee, where the reservation of seats to the SCs and STs was suggested. Then came the important Gadgil Committee of 1988, where it was suggested to have constitutional status, 3-tier system, and then reservation for SC/STs, and importantly the State Finance Commission. After the Gadgil Committee recommendations were given, then came the important constitutional amendments, 73rd and 74th. The 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments in the Indian Constitution was for the first time some sort of a constitutional recognition to local self-government in the form of Gram Panchayats, Zilla Parishad, intermediary panchayats, municipalities, Nagar Panchayats and corporation. Because until then there was no constitutional mention of local bodies in the constitution or any sanctity to a local body in terms of their authority or their relevance in the constitution. So the basis of 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts of 1992 was actually based on Article 40, a directive principle of state policy in the Indian Constitution. So Article 40, because of not being mentioned as a fundamental right, it was mentioned in Article 40, I'll come to it later. And the world scenario, when you may notice, most of the governments globally have not taken local self-governments as constitutional provisions. Only very recently, Brazil and South Africa have actually made this as a tier in the federal structure. Therefore, the Indian 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments actually, we can say, is a very good achievement in taking the local body, local self-governance as an important part of governance and administration. However, if we look at the rationale for having local governments, if you look at India, now we have about 250,000 village panchayats. 250,000 village panchayats. We have about 6,600 intermediate panchayats, that is in the form of either tehsils or taluks or mandals, etc. Then we have about 620 district panchayats, that is the Zilla Parishad districts. Now just imagine, is it possible for one government sitting in Delhi or one government sitting in Hyderabad or Bangalore or Vijayawada for that matter to manage such sort of panchayats? So there is a necessity and there is no other way other than to have a local government or a local body to manage the needs. And when we look at the needs that are there, the needs again are very local in nature. There is a particular place in one part of a state which might be in a delta area, one in an upland area, one with drinking water problems, one with sufficient water but irrigation. So therefore, it becomes a must for the local governance of any habitation to be managed at a local level. Then you have your local representatives who actually are better conversant with the requirements of the particular areas. And when we look at the responsibilities and duties and powers of local bodies, unfortunately, during the constitutional amendment that took place, now there is a provision called 243G in the 73rd constitutional amendment and a schedule called the 11th schedule. There is a similar provision called 243W in the 74th amendment and a 12th schedule. So what do these schedules and what do these sections say? Now 243G, it says, the powers, authority and responsibilities of panchayats, subject to the provisions of this constitution, the legislature of a state may by law endow the panchayats with such powers and authority. There is no mention of shall. It is a may. So the whole difference is the may and the shall. Similarly, when we go to the 74th constitutional amendment, it says 243W. Powers, authority and responsibilities of municipalities, etc., subject to the provisions of this constitution, the legislature of a state may by law endow. Therefore, what are the powers, what are the responsibilities? Basically, more than powers, we should say the responsibilities. What are the responsibilities that are actually given to a Grama Panchayat or an intermediary Panchayat? The responsibilities are, it says the 11th schedule, agriculture including agricultural extension, land improvement, implementation of land reforms, land consideration and soil conservation, mine irrigation, animal husbandry, fisheries, social forestry, minor forest produce, small scale industries, khadi, village and cottage industries, rural housing, drinking water, fuel and fodder, roads, culverts, bridges, etc., ferries, rural electrification, non-conventional energy, poverty alleviation programs, education, technical training, adult and non-formal education, and so on. So in this entire list of 29 responsibilities that are actually supposed to be performed by a Grama Panchayat, which is very meaningful and very necessary, in actuality we actually see only drinking water, roads, culverts, construction, markets and fairs, and maintenance of community assets. These are the only 4 functions which today's Gram Panchayats are actually performing. Similarly, when we go to the functions of a municipality, the 12th schedule for a municipality, it says urban planning including town planning, regulation and land use, planning for economic and social development, roads and bridges, water supply, public health, fire services, so on. Here too again, we come across only regulation of land use and construction of buildings. Here regulation of land use too is not there actually with the local body, only construction of buildings regulation is there. Roads and buildings, bridges of course, water supply of course, provision of urban amenities and facilities like parks, and burial grounds, public amenities and regulation of slaughterhouses. So these are the only 6 functions that are being performed by local bodies. So we can now see that even though the constitutional amendment has taken place, the true spirit, the responsibilities that are supposed to be performed by the local bodies are in reality not being performed. In addition to that, there are a lot of limitations. The limitations being, recently, a lot of parastatal agencies have been incorporated to do various functions that normally ought to have been done by the local bodies. Now you look at a city. Take Hyderabad for example, or Bangalore for example, you will come across a Hyderabad Water Supply and Sewerage Board. Then you will come across a City Development Authority. You will come across a City Regional Development Authority. You will come across a City Electricity Supply Company. You will come across a City Transport Corporation. So bulk of the duties that actually are supposed to be done or executed or performed by a democratically elected local government, in reality are not able to perform any of those duties. So these are all again parastatal agencies that are nominated and have officers who are doing it rather than any democratically elected person. Now you look at a town or a city. The town planning is a very important part. Today, if you look at most of the towns and cities where we find roads, open sites, parks, etc. not being properly maintained or not being properly designed, it is because there is no political participation in the town planning. Whenever there is a political participation, which is coming along with a official or a bureaucratic participation, only then you come out with a good outcome. Because without a political participation, it will be very difficult to understand what are the requirements of the public. End of the day, it is the elected person who knows what the public require. And then if you look at the newer ones that have come, smart cities, JNN, URM, these have again further taken away the functions and the responsibilities of local bodies. Similarly, in rural local bodies, when we observe MNREGA and drought-prone area program, various central schemes are not rooted through the local bodies, not rooted through the gram panchayats, not rooted through the mandal parshads, not rooted through the Zilla Parshad. These are all coming in a parallel, all central schemes are coming in a parallel route where, namesake, you have some sort of a committee. That committee, as per guidelines, are supposed to be chaired by the Sarpanch. But in reality, all these committees actually obey the diktat of the government that is in the state and the member of the Legislative Assembly. So in reality, what has happened is an MLA who is supposed to legislate on various acts and various requirements of the state as per the constitutional delegation is presently not doing that. An MLA is going around seeing if there is water supply. An MLA is going around seeing if the drains are cleaned, which is not the duty of an MLA at all. So, as we have seen the deterioration of the legislatures and the quality of legislation that is being done. If you look at 20-30 years ago, let us say Hyderabad MLA quarters was there. The Legislative Assembly was in session for anywhere between 60 days to 100 days. Whether all the MLAs, legislators participate in the deliberations or not, debate or not, at least during the 60 to 100 days, these people were residing in Hyderabad. When you reside in the headquarters, you get an opportunity to meet important people, knowledgeable people, academicians, the intelligentsia, the professors. You get a chance to meet businessmen, you get a chance to meet various people who are acknowledged in their own fields. Part of which, even if a part of the legislators actually translate that into your legislation, it makes a whole lot of difference. Whereas now, what are the legislators doing? Legislators are basically doing the work that normal gram panchayat sarpanch should have done. They go door to door, they go to the villages, they come in the way of what gram panchayatis, sarpanches or mandal presidents or the Zilla Parshad chairman are supposed to do. And neither are they doing their duty and responsibility of participating in the assembly and deliberations and debates and bringing out new acts or modifications in the acts. They are basically completely transgressing into a different area. And when we come to the finances are also in a very, very dire state. So when we come to the limitations, now you go to the powers that are there for a local body. So basically, amongst the many powers that are given, house tax is the only one where a gram panchayat is actually able to collect. And even that, minor gram panchayatis are barely able to collect any taxes. Because when it comes to a village, the village sarpanch or the village head is finding it difficult to antagonize anybody to collect any sort of tax. So because of that, the taxation, house tax collection, property tax collection in India is absolutely low and probably the lowest in today's world. Other than that, other than the house tax, there is basically no other place where a local body is able to collect. When it comes to a mandal parshads and Zilla Parshads are basically getting revenues only in the form of grants from either the government of India or from the state government in the form of certain projects. In the absence of a state finance commission actually being able to do their duties completely, it is becoming very difficult for the Mandal Parishads or the Zilla Parishads to be able to get any sort of revenues. In these circumstances, if you look at certain data, for example, there was a study done by CRISIL as well as World Bank on the requirement of funds for Indian urban local bodies. So it says in the coming 15 years, that is from 2000 now onwards to the year 2036, from 2021 to 2036, it says approximately about, translated into rupees, 71,50,000 crores is what is required for creating proper urban infrastructure and municipal services in India, in various municipalities, Nagar Panchayats as well as corporations. Out of this, it says this is equivalent to only about 1.18% of the GDP of India, and prices taken at 2020. Out of this, it says 38 lakh crores, almost half of it, that is 38 lakh crores goes for basic municipal services, that is water supply, sewerage, municipal solid waste, etc. And the requirement per capita per year is 9,000 rupees. Whereas presently when we look at it, for the last 10 years, 2011 to 2018, just about 2,200 rupees per capita per annum is actually being spent. So this is the difference in which the municipalities are needing the finances. Then when we come to the commercial financing, what happens is, any project that is taken up, 48% of the project is actually contributed by the states, 24% by the center, 15% by the local bodies from their surplus funds, that is any corporation has any sort of surplus fund with them, and only about 13% is being taken from financial institutions like HUDCO, commercial debt, etc. And here HUDCO, again in that 13%, HUDCO contributes for about 80% of the loans, and commercial debt is, banks is only 2%. So the participation of financial institutions in creation of infrastructure and capital expenditure in local bodies needs to be really enhanced. And when we look at the composition of capital expenditure in the years financial year 11 and 18, a comparison between 11 and 18, we find that local bodies basic services account for about 3.9, parastatals account for local bodies account for 1.7, parastatals for 3.9, and parastatals in the form of metro 1.0. A comparison, that is, the parastatals are actually spending and participating in a bulk of the execution of projects in any corporation or municipality, which normally ought to have been done by a corporation or a municipality. Similarly, when we take a comparison of the property taxes, when we take property tax revenue as a percentage of the GDP, India accounts for 0.48% of the GDP. So the property tax revenue coming in India is 0.48% of the GDP, whereas the BRICS average is 1.21%, that is almost about 3 times. And the G20 average is 1.90%, that is almost about 4 times. Similarly, when we take the property tax revenue as a percentage of the total tax revenue, India is 0.4%. So this is property tax revenue as a percentage of the total tax revenue. India is 0.4%, BRICS average is 4.85%, and the G20 average is 7.60%. So this shows that the property tax collection in India is extremely low when compared to most of the developed countries, or for that matter any country. If we take a look at the per capita collection of property taxes, the per capita collection of property taxes in US dollars, Bihar in India accounts for $0.2, that is 17 rupees. So the property tax collection in the state of Bihar is 17 rupees per annum, whereas the highest is United States, where it is $1,638. So in the US it is $1,638. In Bihar it is $0.2. And the highest in India is Maharashtra with $23. That translates to about 2,000 rupees approximately. So this is the difference in the property tax collection between various countries as well as in India. Now, the way that finances are being contributed to the local bodies, one other data that we have is property tax declined from about 61% of the total revenues to 15% from 1960-61 to 2019-20. That is, property tax was supposed to be 61% in the year 2000, in the year 1960-61, which has actually declined to 15.5% in 2019-20. So that means in the last many decades, property tax collection has not grown or increased as per the normal growth that should have been there. In fact, it has decreased. Similarly, own sources, when you look at the own sources of the municipalities or corporations, in 1960-61, what was 85% has come down to 64% in 2019-20. Here again, you can see the decrease. And when we look at cities, cities which contribute to about 63% of the national GDP, but only about 5% of the credit of the scheduled commercial banks is going into the capital expenditure in the cities. So this also shows the participation of the banking institutions into the limited participation of banking institutions into the creation of assets in the local bodies. So now we are left with basically any local body, whether it's a Gram Panchayat or a municipality or a Mandal Parishad, the limited opportunity is only house tax, and then the grant that comes from the Government of India. So Government of India, if you look at the Government of India grant, it actually started with the Finance Commission grant for the first time that actually gave sufficient money, and the 10th Finance Commission gave about 5,381 crores. The 11th Finance Commission gave about 10,000 crores. The 12th Finance Commission gave about 25,000 crores. The 13th Finance Commission gave about 87,500 crores. And there was a quantum leap. The quantum leap came in the 14th Finance Commission, where 2,87,000 crores was given to the local bodies of India, both rural and urban. And this has to be appreciated for the reason that from 87 to 287, the 15th Finance Commission again gave one other big recommendation of 4,36,000 crores. So this actually is a very interesting part from a particular book, which says the 14th Finance Commission took the stand that distribution of grants among the panchayats and the municipalities should be best left to the state governments, provided that it was based on the recommendations of the State Finance Commission. In case that formula was not available, a default option was provided whereby the distribution was on the basis of the 2011 population with a weightage of 90% for population and 10% for area. The background to this innovation was best described by Dr. Y.V. Reddy, the chairman of the commission. It says, we applied the idea of default option in public policy advocated in the book The Nudge by Richard H. Thaler and Cass Sunstein. The default option meant that if you do not decide or till you decide, what we propose will amount to your decision. So this actually is a very interesting way of giving a recommendation. The states were refusing or delaying the formation of the state finance commissions. So for that reason, the 14th Finance Commission, in order to overcome that, said, until you decide, whatever we decide will be your decision. So this actually, and it also says that, incidentally, the default option that was taken from the book The Nudge, it says that incidentally Professor Thaler won the Nobel Prize in 2017. And then we have various ways where we can raise certain finances. One is a viability gap funding. Now, when we look at various municipalities, municipal corporations, etc., they have huge amount of land. So this land located in central places where either it is prone to be encroached or used by various people for unauthorized shops, etc. The municipalities and municipal corporations actually find it very difficult to raise money to build some sort of a commercial enterprise which can be used to gain some rents and other revenues. So this is one way where state governments and Government of India can come forward and give that VGF, because commercial banks, when they come to finance such shops or other commercial establishment, the return on the loan normally does not permit them to give. So a small viability gap funding in the form of a grant given, here you get a permanent income to the local body, a structure that is there for eternity, and number 3 is it prevents that particular place from encroachment. I had an experience such things when I was an MLA. In 2019 to 20, there is a particular location in Dhone town, a small town, my constituency headquarters, where age-old small shops, multiples of them in the form of, you can actually call them not shops but squatters, sitting on an important piece of land. When we wanted to build a commercial establishment, commercial complex, many number of times we approached banks, but it was becoming difficult. So we gave a state grant to some extent which covers the gap that actually is required to make it a viable proposition. Now, even after taking a loan of about 6 crores from the local credit cooperative society, we still get an income that is far more than, we get a revenue that is far more than what is required to pay back. So once we pay back the loan, which takes about 10 or 12 years, after that, the huge income that is there, this income, this revenue stream actually takes care of one particular area of expenditure. That is, the entire electricity bill of Dhone municipality can be taken care of just by the revenue that comes from that. This originally, I had this idea when I was the Sarpanch of my native place, Bethamcherla. So there was a program called Food for Work. So these are my experiences when I was the Sarpanch and as an MLA. There was a program called Food for Work. The Food for Work program was such that there was a lot of food grain coming. A lot of bureaucrats here, I think, will know that program, where that was used to make some sort of a roads and other things. So roads in the form of gravel roads or metal roads, etc., which actually provide work, but at the same time they are not permanent in nature. I, as Sarpanch, so thought of how best to make use of this money or this opportunity. So we selected small bits and pieces of land which was encroached by people having those small shops and squatters. So we explained to them that we are going to build some shops and we are going to accommodate you again over there, don't worry. So one particular example was a burial ground. So this burial ground had an area around the burial ground which was almost of 15 feet in width, all along the periphery. So we made shops all along the boundary wall, and we made multiple shops. Those shops and such other establishments that we made, all of those together now provide for few lakhs of rupees in the form of revenues to Bethamcherla Gram Panchayat, which otherwise the same money would have been used to make some gravel roads, which over a period of 2 or 3 years would have been washed off by the rains. So this was one experience of mine. And then there are some programs that are actually done by government, central government in the form of centrally sponsored schemes or by NABARD. There was one other example. NABARD had a program called Rural Infrastructure Development Fund. I think they still have it now. So RIDF was giving certain money for certain programs. There was one certain program where they were constructing check dams. So I was a Sarpanch then, and there was a very a collector who was very for Kurnool district. He was what you call very positive. One Mr. Sai Prasad, who is now a senior officer in Andhra Pradesh. So I had gone to him as he was the collector and I was the Sarpanch. I had gone to him and said, we, Bethamcherla, we have a water problem. We are dependent only on borewells. So in case you can give us an opportunity to construct some sort of a solid check dams upstream side of the borewells where water can percolate. So he gave a bulk of the money, which we constructed these check dams all around Bethamcherla, and that is the way in which percolation has happened, and most of the borewells today are perennial. Then the limitations of local bodies. Sometimes it becomes very frustrating for somebody who is a Sarpanch or a Mandal president, because you don't have anything with you. You don't have any money, you don't have any authority, you don't have any power. One other example to show the difficulties that Sarpanches face. Because of our village being located in a severely drought-prone area, we rarely have rains and we always have water problems, and because of the elevation, we don't have any tanks to support our drinking water needs. Then there was one particular instance where my sister had come down with her children to India, so I had taken them to Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, etc. So that was the 4th year of drought. 4th year of drought, and all the borewells were dried up. Huge place with a population of about 25,000, have to cater to the needs by transportation, tanker transportation, and tankers, very difficult to transport water through tankers because there's a fight wherever the tankers go. In fact, we used to sometimes on the lighter side say, if there's a colony where people are living happily, send a tanker, then you'll start a fight there. And a lot of people in the evenings used to come, hordes of them used to come and say there's no water. There was no way that I could answer to them. So innovative ways. I used to have a packet of chocolates with me, Newton chocolates or Parle chocolates. So people used to come carrying their children, and then they used to come very angry, saying that there's no water. That entire anger used to be focused on us, whereas we don't have anything in our hands. There's nothing that a Sarpanch can do, but other than to face the brunt and the anger. So they used to come carrying children, and I used to give the children chocolates, and they used to somehow calm down a little bit and go. These are all innovative ways that we used to handle our difficulties. So then we went to this place called Fatehpur Sikri. So Fatehpur Sikri, I remember, it was the 4th year of drought. There was not a single borewell working. So there is one place where you tie a thread and you make a wish. I think it is the tomb of Salim Chishti. So then my sister with her children went, I came out, I was standing outside, and my sister came and, who is elder to me, asked me, so what did you pray? So I said, first you tell me what you pray for. So she said, what else can I pray for? That my children study well and they do well. Then she asked me, what did you pray for? I said, this is the 4th year. 10 kilometers away, Rangapuram has rainfall. 10 kilometers this side, Orvakal has rainfall. 20 kilometers, Kurnool has rainfall. What did we do not to have any rain for 4 years? So I really prayed to God that if at all you are there, it should rain. Actually, very, very rare instances. I think we stayed in a hotel Holiday Inn, if I remember correctly, in Jaipur. From Fatehpur Sikri, we went to Jaipur for the night. So then, early morning at about 3 o'clock, cell phones had recently come in then. My cousin brother called saying that heavy rain, in fact 2 houses collapsed. So these are all experiences and that we went through. But end of the day, then we also used to have another difficulty. The difficulty was to actually go and reach out to the administration. So any big panchayat, the local MLA would not want any municipal chairman to be powerful, any municipal chairman to be, forget about powerful, to be popular. He would not want to have any Gram Panchayat Sarpanch to be popular. So multiple ways in cutting down the popularity or the power or the authority they are normally designing. So here, as a Sarpanch, one day I went to our, for a small work, I had to meet the DRO. And then this DRO's room is located towards one end of the Kurnool collectorate, where the corridor ends and you go out. There's a huge big neem tree. So I was coming to Hyderabad. My cousin and brother-in-law also, he was with me. So I said, I'll just go inside, I'll go and meet the DRO for one particular issue, I'll come back. So just wait there. So he waited. it took 4 hours and odd. So after sitting in the car, just for an appointment with the DRO. So after sitting in the car, we were traveling to Hyderabad. My cousin told me, who also happens to be my brother-in-law, told me, if this is politics, if this is the case, even if somebody gives me a Rajya Sabha free of cost, I don't want it. So this is how a normal life of a Sarpanch. And then I had many people telling me, after all Sarpanch. So after hearing this, after all Sarpanch multiple times, my determination in me grew. In fact, it helped in a way. I thought, oh, now I am after all Sarpanch. One day I'll become an MLA, then I'll show you what an after all Sarpanch is. So these are all experiences. It was difficult. It is difficult even now. But basically now when we go back to the constitutional amendments, the power, the responsibilities, the powers, the duties, why are they not being given to the local bodies, which actually is necessary, is political will. Political will, again, when you look at it, politicians rarely understand the importance of local bodies. So I'll give an explanation of the importance of local bodies and how it will not be detrimental to any political leader or political party. It will in fact help. I'll tell you why. Now you take Andhra Pradesh as a case study. Now in a democracy, it is the political party that actually comes to power and authority. And the leader of the political party is the head, and ideally and normally the leader of the political party would want to be the leader of the state for eternity until he passes. That is how it is. So now he does not want any local bodies coming into his area of power or coming into his. This is the reason that over a period of time the state governments and the federal government has actually not been able to encourage the local bodies. Now when you look at the way it is actually useful, very few people will understand this. Now you take Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh has 13,325 gram panchayats. So that means there are 13,325 sarpanches. Andhra Pradesh has 1,22,450 ward members. Every gram panchayat has few wards. So 1,22,450 ward members. Then you have 660 mandals. That means you have 660 mandal presidents. You have 9,700 MPTCs, that is Mandal Parishad Territorial Constituency members. You have 660 ZPTCs, Zilla Parishad Territorial Constituency members. You have 17 corporations, that means 17 mayors. You have 929 corporators. You have 82 municipalities. You have 24 Nagar Panchayats and municipal chairpersons, and you have 3,000 councillors. So totally it is a 1,51,000 people who are elected. 1,51,000 people only in Andhra Pradesh. Now a political party, tell me, where is your army? A nation has the army in the form of army. A state has the army in the form of police. Where does a political party has its army? The political party has its army not more in the form of your members. It is actually in the form of members who become elected representatives. That means by supporting the local body system, you have 1,51,000 people belonging to different political parties who are your actual army. A person who is a member of a party is different from with his commitment to a person who is occupying a party post, but a person who is most committed to a political party is a person who is an elected representative on a particular party ticket. So anybody who understands this will understand that encouraging local bodies, encouraging political participation is your strength. Now once upon a time, Zilla Parishad is the focal point of governance in a district. A normal person who is the head of a state, what do? They have a cabinet. So cabinet consists of their colleague ministers. To have a balance and a normal check and balance, they normally have a tough bureaucrat with a minister. So this is a check and balance to the minister. I think a lot of bureaucrats understand. Then you have a tough collector in a particular district. The main reason being, one, for administration, more importantly from the political point, to be a check and balance to the minister. Instead of doing all this check and balance to the polity through the bureaucracy, while you disturb both the polity as well as the bureaucracy, the best way to do it is have a strong Zilla Parishad chairman. Your strong Zilla Parishad chairman is going to sit there. He is going to be the check and balance to the local minister. He is going to do the administration and governance at the local level. A lot of people, they miss this point. The reason is the fundamental duty of a leader. In Telugu they say, Dhana, Mana, Prana, Rakshana. The wealth of the common man, the modesty of the common man, and the life of the common man, the protection of this is the fundamental duty of a leader. Beyond this, the next duty is to provide basic services. So normal common man is not asking for a Singapore, not asking for a London, not asking for a Tokyo to build anywhere. They are asking for safety and protection to their lives, to their property, a basic decent means of living, and decent services of utility. Forgetting this, everybody is going more forward, unnecessarily leaving these things behind. So when you look at the needs of somebody in a city, transportation, water supply, sewerage, instead of having all these parastatals, if you actually give it to the democratically elected people, I am sure that the delivery will be far, far better than what actually is being implemented now. I'll give you one other example. When I was a minister in the last term, I came to know that there are about 160 R&B guest houses. So normally the roads and buildings or PWD guest houses that are there, they occupy a large space and are located centrally in every town. Now, most of the cities and towns, what are people asking for? In addition to some social infra, in addition to your water and sewerage, etc., transport, social infra. Social infra in the form of parks, in the form of some lung spaces. Now I said all these R&B guest houses are unused, with shrub, with snakes, with dogs, with pigs, with donkeys, and the R&B guest house that is there is located in one corner. These guest houses are sitting in 2 acres, 3 acres, 5 acres of land. So I came out with a proposal. We called both the municipal administration as well as the roads and buildings. I said, see, this entire area is unused. So whatever R&B guest houses are there, let us cordon them off. The rest, why don't you hand over this to the urban local body? Let the urban local body develop the park and put it for public use. Then the immediate resistance starts. Sir, who has the money? So how much money do you need? You need very little money. Basically, it is about doing some repairs to the existing compound wall, removing the shrub that is there, planting some trees, and having a nominal entry fee which anybody will be pleased to pay. After a certain point of time, once it is developed, I am sure that any industry in that particular town will be more than happy to adopt that park. We started this actually, but we were close to the election, so it got stalled. But I am saying different ways in which the local bodies can actually put to use their whatever mandate that has been given to them. And when we look at this, where is the deficiency coming from? The deficiency is coming mainly not just from the Constitution and the provisions in the Constitution, but from the will of the political parties and the polity. The will. Not able to understand, because the day they understand the importance of the local bodies, then the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, which says may, will automatically become a shall, because that shall will come from the will. When you look at the governance, democracy also, I think, has certain structural defects. Judiciary, for example, somebody becomes a judge. He would have put in 25-30 years, starting as a lawyer and then gradually rising his way. In the bureaucracy, somebody becomes a secretary. He would have started and then after about 25 or 30 years, he would have risen there. And then any other part of the government you see, anybody who reaches a level in the executive where they actually take decisions or need to take decisions. What about the polity? where is the training happening? Where is the training happening? Where is the capacity building being done? And democracy in our country is such that anybody can become an elected representative. So the deficiency that is there, most of them I would say, not able to understand the finer points is because there is no probation. There is a direct entry, which we can call it as something like a lateral entry. So the actual understanding of politics will come from three areas. One is the student unions, one is the trade unions, and the most important part is the local bodies. If we notice, people who have become good leaders, who have become statesmen, at some point of time have actually started as Samiti presidents. They have done their Zilla Parshads, they have been municipal chairmen, they have been mayors. These people understand the administration and governance. So the fine line that differentiates administration and governance. Unless a politician understands administration, he cannot actually take part in governance. When you do a lateral entry, you are going directly into policy making without understanding the administrative part, whereby all these difficulties are cropping up. And one important mention of the importance of local bodies, apart from the limitations of the constitutional amendments, is a particular case where the Rangareddy Sarpanch's Association had contested against the 1995 Andhra Pradesh Panchayat Raj Act. So there was a dissent note. Of course, it went with the government for the reason that the constitution did not actually provide for that. But the dissent note, which was given by Judge Honorable Goda Raghuram. So Goda Raghuram's judgment, very, very nice judgment, which gives a deep understanding into the constitutional amendment. It says, despite such knowledge, if by the 73rd amendment, Article 243G and H were enacted, is it legitimate or logical to assume that the purpose of the amendment is merely to reiterate, emphasize and reinforce the availability of legislative power in the state legislature, to make a law to endow such power, authority and responsibility on the panchayats as the legislature thinks fit? Rarely, if at all, would an enabling grant of power require such repetitive verbal emphasis and by an amendatory exercise requiring special procedure. The expression may, taken together with the text, philosophy and object of the 73rd Amendment, court is of the considered view that the expression may, occurring in Article 243G, approximates more to a constitutional command crouched in a differential verbal choice in recognition of the fact that the command is addressed to a high authority, the legislature. It would be impermissible to conclude that the state legislature has the discretion whether or not to endow the panchayats with any powers and authority or to devolve upon them any powers and responsibilities. A balanced theory of interpretation of the Constitution's decentralization of power values warrants the conclusion that while incorporating provisions for control of the Panchayat Raj institutions to achieve the overall and legitimate purposes of the state, such controls ought not to entail total stultification, emasculation or negation of the democratic choice of the local population expressed in the election to the local bodies. A state legislation that divests or withholds effective power of local governance from the elected representatives of the panchayats would tantamount to a legislation that subverts the constitutional purposes of Part 9. A beautiful piece of dissent note, because when the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments were made, the objects and reasons very clearly specifies the requirement, the need for doing it. It says the objects and reasons while enacting the 73rd constitutional amendment was, in many states, local bodies have become weak and ineffective on account of a variety of reasons, including the failure to hold regular elections, prolonged suppressions, and inadequate devolution of powers. Having regard to these inadequacies, it is considered necessary that provisions relating to urban local bodies are incorporated in the Constitution, particularly for putting on a firmer footing the relationship between the state government and the urban local bodies. When it comes to the rural local bodies, again it says, the objects and reasons says, Though the Panchayat Raj institutions have been in existence for a long time, it has been observed that these institutions have not been able to acquire the status and dignity of viable and responsible people bodies due to a number of reasons, including absence of regular elections, prolonged suppressions, insufficient representations of weaker sections like scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and women, inadequate devolution of powers and lack of financial resources. Article 40 in the beginning, which I wanted to mention, of the Constitution, which enshrines one of the directive principles of state policy, lays down that the state shall take steps to organize village panchayats and endow them with such powers and authority as may be necessary to enable them to function as units of self-government. In the light of the experience in the last 40 years and in view of the shortcomings which have been observed, it is considered that there is an imperative need to enshrine in the Constitution certain basic and essential features of the Panchayat Raj institution to impact certainty, continuity and strength to them. So this is the evolution and the limitations and the wonderful dissent note of Judge Goda Raghuram, which actually any politician, after understanding the need of having a local body, of the way in which a political party can actually gain strength, of the requirement of the population as well as the provisions in the Constitution, I think once they understand, they will actually definitely strengthen the local bodies. And the reason that we had this through the looking glass, I think all of you are aware of Alice in Wonderland. After going through the looking glass, you understand that everything that you actually thought of is opposite. Similarly, with regard to the local bodies, everything that was envisaged, thought and dreamt of by Mahatma Gandhi today doesn't actually appear to be present. Thank you all. Here for giving me this opportunities to address this subject, because this is I actually owe my entire political understanding to my stint as a Sarpanch, and I truly believe that the position of a Sarpanch is amongst the most difficult positions that actually can be done. Thank you.
Exposition of the local government, I can see that more than anything else, this government and this country needs more Sarpanches like you. I mean, you're a very rare person, and the country should cherish people like you. And I'm sure your experience will stand in good stead for what we want to achieve in this country through its political systems.
Recently, I was talking to a social activist who's turned a politician, and I was bemoaning about lack of vision in terms of various social capital building efforts. And he said something very important. He said, most of these political leaders don't necessarily have empathy. And because they don't have empathy, they don't necessarily have a vision. Which goes back to the Gandhian philosophy that you spoke about. And of course, Gandhi believed that the smaller the unit, the closer would be the relations in which you can build an understanding of each other and about an understanding of what their needs are, and hence work towards their welfare. Now, one of the critical parts, and you probably would be in a good place to answer this, is this debate between so-called divergence of welfare versus development, and the dehumanization that we see of welfare recipients based on which party provides what welfare scheme. Would it have been far less? Would our own poor people have been dehumanized less if, for instance, most of these welfare activities which were envisaged for the Panchayat Raj or the local bodies had been conducted by them? Would the political discourse itself have become a little gentler and a little more civilized if it had been at the level, if the implementation level was at the lower level?
One is the welfare and one is the implementation of the welfare. The welfare, if I may take an example of the welfare that our government did. So it was mainly in two areas. One was empowerment of women and giving them more opportunities for a better livelihood. So thereby the self-help groups, whatever loans they had, we've sort of reimbursed the loan. and that money was credited to their accounts. It was a huge 26,000 crores spread over 5 years. And then was a program to incentivize sending children to school, because AP had a slightly low GER. And then, of course, was the help to the help extended to the farmers, which was actually complementing the Government of India's initiative. So this was done directly. So now the selection of beneficiaries. So the point is, where does the local body come in? The selection of beneficiaries. The policy that our government adopted was saturation mode. So when it is a saturation mode, the selection of beneficiary actually does not arise. Now let us say you are giving benefit to 100 people, you have to select 100 from 1,000 or 200. So that is when a local body's presence is a must, because you have to have a Grama Sabha. In the Grama Sabha, you have to select the 100 out of the 200 or 300 applicants. But here, our government, the selection was done on a saturation mode. Everybody was eligible, got it. And the eligible criteria for eligibility was based on certain your BPL, your consumption of power, your size of your house, etc. So anybody who fit into it automatically got it. So it would have been nice for everything to happen through a local body, because at the end of the day, there is an elected person over there. But then in this particular, the minute you say saturation mode, the head of the local body will only be overseeing, but not actually participating in the selection process.
No, is it not that we never consciously fought against these feudal attitudes, except as for some individuals expressing against? In fact, many Rajas and feudal elements have been cabinet ministers, both in central government and even in state governments. Maybe today also they are there, I do not know. And other people also do have feudal attitudes only. In the 60s, for example, when I was in a village, there used to be talk that we won't allow any buses into our village. That kind of talk used to be there by people who had authority. Now, of course, a lot of change has taken place, but that is inevitable because and dynamics of change has happened. It is not because we consciously want transfer of wealth and all that to the other people who don't have. What
does not make a Raja or a feudal Raja ineligible to contest an election. So they are contesting elections and being elected. And but I think the days that you are talking about, sir, and now there's a lot of change. A lot of Rajas are not residing in the villages actually. They all come to the cities now. So you can find Rajas in the cities. But I think a lot of change has come about.
You were mentioning about the increased allocations in the Finance Commission. I read a news article about 2 weeks back that in the Union Budget 25-26 for the National Institute of Rural Development and Panchayat Raj in Rajendranath, Hyderabad, the budget foresees a grant of 1 lakh, okay, for this institute, which is supposed to be for capacity building in rural development and Panchayat Raj. Is it a case of souring of center-state relations, or is there a deeper meaning to it?
I can understand from my experience in the government is, normally, National Institute is a total national subject. So, they normally do not, while establishing a new National Institute, the government in the center might be partial to their own political party, or to their allies. Now, for example, there was a Makana board formed in Bihar. So, NIID is a national, I suppose, and this 1 lakh rupees, there is one way in government, what we do is we call it a budget line. So when we are not sure of how much money to actually give to the institute or the institution, what we do is we open a budget line. So opening of a budget line is through a normal sum of money. After that, depending on the requirement, we start giving supplementary releases. That is normal, because 1 lakh rupees for NIRD actually doesn't mean correct. So most likely it will be a budget line, opening of a budget line. After that, the funds again, grant comes later. I think that could be.
You have mentioned about our system, bureaucratic system, the way they are responding and requirement of the upskilling after once they get into the system. Today, all decisions what we are taking based on the historical data. But actually there is a transformation which is happening. The changes are very fast in what happening in the future. So like there is one example, I'll take it up, like today central government released for all the cities the heat metrics. There should be a problem oriented kind of a designation should come, like now chief heat officer who is typically responsible to address heat in the metros are like that. Is it some changes are required in our structure who look into the future and take decisions, not always look into the historical monotonously what they are doing? So is this change is required? What do you say, sir?
Administration of villages, towns and cities in developed countries, we can clearly see that the people who are democratically elected also are very knowledgeable. In fact, I was quite surprised in recent times in Africa, where we see so much of poverty and such backwardness. A bulk of the ministers there are all very highly educated, qualified, as well as committed. So we normally have a different opinion, our perception, but when we see certain places, I won't say all, but certain places that I have traveled, all very well educated. So along with education and exposure also comes your capacity to govern well. So here, as you asked, somebody, one way is looking at the past and taking policy decisions. One is anticipating the future and taking policy decisions. So normally this assessment and anticipation of the future requirement is done at a official level. Here the political participation is very little. When there is political participation along with the official officials, that is when you get a good outcome. That is what I mentioned. It is like two tracks for a railway line. When the two tracks are there and the travel is in harmony, the outcome is always good.
Just, how you as an MLA and the minister integrated with our local body is the municipal, with the municipal chairman and the council, right? And developed the constituency in the last 5 years. I really witnessed, and that was a dream of me, when the local bodies are empowered and actually the tussle or the whatever the partnership that you are talking about, right, between the elected government and the local bodies, right, if they work together, what magics can happen, I have really witnessed, and really like to commend what you have done to the Dhone constituency with the help of the empowered body and local body. It's amazing, and I'm pretty sure you would have shared much journey of it apart from your journey as a Sarpanch. So my question, sir, so there are certain states in the country, right, as for example Kerala, were able to get more, the state financial commissions were able to transfer the revenue shares to the local bodies as opposed to the grants, right? So I heard and read more than 10 to 15% would get transferred. Is one challenge why other states are not able to replicate? And what, I know there are weaker provisions in the constitutions which don't mandate the state governments to transfer those, in the form of shares. I'm not talking about the grants, but as a revenue share, like how the states receive the shares from the central through the Central Finance Commission, why those shares cannot be given as a first question. And second is how I seen still the municipal administration, right, is led by the, let's say, a municipal chairman, right? But still there are like municipal commissioners who are directly reporting to collectors and to the government. They take probably a more control over the elected body, and how this can also be fixed.
So State Finance Commission is a very important body, and it is one of the most important aspects or parts of the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments. So presently, local bodies, as I explained before, have very little scope for gathering any revenues. So, and especially rural local bodies or Nagar Panchayats. So it has to come in the form of a grant. So one grant that we get is in the form of Finance Commission grant. Similarly, it has to be augmented through a State Finance Commission grant. So where does the Finance Commission give the grant from? There is something called a divisible pool. So this is various taxes that are collected in the form of corporation tax, income tax, customs and central excise. All the taxes collected by the union becomes the divisible pool. From the divisible pool, a part of it comes as devolution to the state. Only a state can get a share of the taxes, whereas local bodies are not authorized or do not get any share of the taxes. Therefore, they get it in the form of a grant, which comes from the divisible pool. Similarly, just like how the union gets taxes in the form of corporation tax, income tax, customs, central excise, etc., etc., the state also, even though it is limited, it gets in the form of VAT on petroleum, VAT on excise. State has got its own state's own resources, both tax and non-tax. So the state's own resources that you get, from the state's own resources, ideally, normally, a state ought to be giving a part of that in the form of a grant. Just like how the Finance Commission gives a grant, similarly, state also ought to give the grant. That is why, in addition to the 5-year tenure, in addition to reservation for SCs, in addition to various important aspects of the 73rd, 74th constitutional amendments, State Finance Commission is also a very important part. Unfortunately, that is not being implemented, but it has to come that way. Kerala probably respects the constitutional amendments more than other states, and there is far more participation also in the form of the local body representatives. And the second question was, I forgot. Okay. So here, again, I was telling you, capacity building. So anybody who gets elected as a Sarpanch or as a municipal chairman, normally what is his experience in the field of politics? It might not be much. So by the time you actually learn what you are supposed to do, what is your mandate, what is your power, what is your authority, what is your responsibility, what is your duty, you learn it quickly, then you are in control. You do not learn it, the commissioner is in control. Have you read the book Yes Minister? You read the book Yes Minister, it will give a detailed explanation of this.
So I have a question. From what I understand from your thing is that generally politicians are sensitive to what people want. So what I have been thinking the last half an hour is this, and with my own experience in this, that I find that, it's easy to convince a politician on what people want. Like you actually innovated as a Sarpanch, but it's very difficult to work with a bureaucrat who says he knows everything. So is the bureaucracy responsible for the lack of devolution of revenue to the local government?
Devolution has to be political will, because eventually, finally, it is the political will, and the bureaucracy has to respect the decision of the polity. So the responsibility of respecting the local bodies and the responsibility of devolution, the responsibility of grants, everything lies completely with the politicians. They have to.
So you don't think bureaucracy is a hurdle for this? Why did it not happen the way you would like to it happen? How come we don't trust our local self-government with more money?
Either the politician is not understanding the importance of local bodies, or the politician is coming through some sort of entry into it where he is not able to see the importance, or he deliberately does not want to give power to the local bodies for the reason that he wants it with himself. Now, parastatals. Now, I gave the case of a city. So, city, this metropolitan water supply and sewerage, when is it with the board automatically is with the government, not with the local, not with the mayor. The transport is with the transport corporation, it is not with the mayor. The electricity is with the electricity board, it is not with the mayor. So ultimately the mayor is left with a ceremonial post, which is probably why they want, the reason that they want it to be that way, not understanding that empowerment of mayor, that is the reason that I gave you the list of 1,51,000 posts available in Andhra Pradesh, which can become an army for any political party.
Coming into the constitution, we know that Indian constitution is neither federal nor unitary, but I don't know, the framers of the constitution, they felt that there is need for strong union. But even in the constitution, lists are clearly given regarding the distribution of the powers, imposition of taxes, collection of revenue. But even then, everybody knows that how the center or financial commission in favor of some states, how when it comes to special category status or special status or whatever it is. Of course, it is a political issue. Now, when it comes to state bodies, we also know that I feel that somewhere it is also some kind of political in nature when it comes to sanctioning of funds or whatever it may be. Because we have seen that number of sarpanches in Telangana state, they have committed suicides when they have spent their own money for the development of their local bodies. So how you will see this situation?
We are definitely federal in structure. Of course, the autonomy that is given to the states, I would say over a period of time has slowly reduced. This could be for two reasons. One is with GST coming in, the tax raising powers of the states has come down, and the states now I would say a lot of states are complaining that the center is not being fair to them. Could be partly true, it depends a little on which political party is there, etc. But again, are the states looking at the Zilla Parishad the same way? When you are not looking at your Zilla Parishad, you are expecting the center to look at you separately. So morally, first you have to occupy the high ground to be able to deal with the center. The state and center relationship normally will be good when there is a statesmanly sort of government that is available in the center and state. Then that balance actually will be maintained better than what we see now. And when it comes to special category status, special category normally is given only to states that have particular nature about it. One is the borders, international borders. One is the hilly states. One is where they have a lot of forest cover and they cannot be like normal states because of them not being able to gather any revenues or improve the way that we can. So that probably will be of a separate, different nature and different criteria, which we cannot compare with the other states, and it might not be possible for the center to give the special category status to a normal state too. Of course, AP is a special case, which there was a assurance given on the floor of the House, which should be given. But in normal circumstances, it might not be that easy.
So question one is, you had Nadu Nedu, which was a flagship program, spent a lot of money, and I actually saw a lot of good being done on the ground. And second thing was an amazing way that you handled COVID last time. So how much of it was actually driven from from the top, and what was the role of local bodies? How did they get involved, local communities? Because the results, let's accept it, went the other way.
Completely government-driven program, top-down, and the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Sri Jagannath Reddy Garu, who actually founded the program, he personally oversaw the implementation. However, Nadu Nedu was in two areas, education and health. Education, while renovating and repairs done to schools, etc., there was local participation. Health was, hospitals, etc., was of a different nature, bigger in size, so that was done through government contracting. But education, almost all the schools, the repairs, renovation, thousands of crores that was spent, was done by the local school committees who oversaw the execution of the project. And it brought about a huge difference to the quality of infrastructure of government schools. Government schools now in villages, even in towns in Andhra Pradesh, are far better equipped, from good buildings to toilets to running water to maintenance of toilets to, in fact, the then Chief Minister Sri Jagannath Reddy Garu, he even monitored the maintenance of toilets. So out of 15,000 rupees that was given as an incentive for education of children to the mother, flagship program called Ammavadi, 1,000 rupees of that was kept as a fund called Toilet Maintenance Fund, where people were appointed to clean toilets, then running water was given to toilets, drinking water, and digital classrooms. So all this was part of the Nadu Nedu program. So this was a top-down. But the execution of the construction and civil work was done by the committees.